the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are a team that AC, I know, would consider a contender this year. Obviously, they get one of the best players in the game back, Aaron Rodgers. And this is a team that for years has needed secondary players. They finally go out, they get their secondary players. I gave the Green Bay Packers an A. They got 2 corners that a lot of people would consider in at least the top 5. I would say Jari Alexander was my number 2 corner. Joshua Jackson was like my number 4 or 5 corner. But a lot of people actually consider Joshua Jackson a first-round pick. The thing about both these picks is that they're quite different in the style of corner that they are. Josh Jackson, more of a zone corner. Jari Alexander, kind of more of a man corner. Both have really good ball skills. Both can make a lot of plays on the back end, which I think the Packers have desperately needed. They also drafted King last year. So they're forming a young kind of trio and a young depth chart on defense in that secondary. And then you also have Clinton Dix, who's already established safety. Then moving down the draft, they just went receivers. You know, they drafted a punter, which I thought in the 5th round was a little bit of a crazy reach, but it is what it is. Inside linebacker, they also needed. That was where the 3rd-round pick need. Burks, I don't know much about him, but obviously it fits a need. I thought that they could have used an inside linebacker maybe earlier in the draft, but there weren't a ton of great ones in this draft. Again, not a lot of great linebackers or pass rushers, but Burks goes in the 3rd round. He has a lot of speed. He has athleticism, which I think they're missing. And then receivers, they just took 3 basically in a row outside of the punter. So they just added a bunch of receivers to this competition, because if you really look at their depth chart, outside of Adams and Cobb, they don't really have that 3rd guy. So adding all those guys to the competition, maybe one of them sticks out and becomes something. They had a ton of picks in this draft. They really needed to get younger. I thought they did that, and they addressed their biggest need, which was secondary. AC, what'd you think of this draft from Green Bay?
Yeah, this is actually one of my most underrated drafts, and I gave them an A. I think they hit on a lot of stuff. First of all, they've been waiting to get this corner tandem going. Obviously, Jari Alexander can play the slot, which, you know, looking at the NFC North, you're going to be going against a lot of good slot receivers. So I think he steps up, and he's your number one nickel right away. And I think, too, Josh Jackson, I think there was character concerns that made him drop, but he easily could have been a first-round pick. You know, right now the starting is Kevin King and Tramon Williams outside. So if you think about it, Josh Jackson is just going to be able to push those guys and maybe not one. When I look
at it, I sort of think that Josh Jackson will end up being one of the starters. I think it's probably going to be King, Jackson, Alexander in the inside, and then have Tramon Williams as sort of like a safety corner, like.
Yeah, because obviously, and Tramon Williams is big enough that he could go around. You know what I mean? He's pretty wide. Like he
just sort of like a, what would you call it? But like an ace sort of player. He just kind of
And you know, I think Oren Burks is gonna be able to move around a lot, because obviously he's playing behind Blake Martinez, who I think is an up and comer. I think, you know, if you look at Green Bay, I don't mind. You know, obviously bring Jim Graham. You know, Ty Montgomery, when Aaron Rodgers plays, is a pretty good running back. And obviously they had, you know, I guess pretty good might be a little
actually, who was the rookie they had last year?
Aaron Jones, right? And they still have Jamal Williams too, was that other rookie. So like those guys can come in. And their offensive line I think is pretty decent. It's just they got, you know, they never
lost
healthy.
Some depth there a little bit, but in the last couple of years, but it's so good.
If anything, the guard position, but their tackles, Beluga and Bakatari are not bad, and then Corey Lindsey's a great center. And then, you know, you're going to hit on one of these guys, one of these receivers. Obviously, from where they were drafted.
And Green Bay's typically good at drafting receivers, too, so you got to give them a benefit.
And obviously, where they were drafted, Jamon Moore obviously would be the front runner, but I really like Equiminius St. Brown, because I watched a lot of Notre Dame games, and he can play. And I think he kind of fits the mold of a Packers receiver. So I easily could see 2 of those guys. I don't know much about the South Florida guy, but I easily could seeing Moore and St. Brown step up and easily be the 3-4 receivers.
Yeah, interesting thing about these receivers too: 6'5", 6'5", 6'3".
Yeah. And because right now ahead of them is only Geronimo Allison and D'Angelo Yancey and Trevor Davis, who we saw bits of. But like these guys, I think that's what they did it. That, you know, it's one of those things they're going to hit on. I really like their draft. I think it's one of the better ones in the NFL. And it's just nice that finally their new GM is being aggressive, going out, doing things, because for a long time, I guess it worked time to time, but after it didn't, you could see that depth was always an issue for them and injuries. So, you know, I'm judging draft grades too on if no one gets hurt. But obviously that's tough. But we'll see.
And I know that some people could have said that they could have used a pass rusher, but they already had sort of addressed that. I mean, you have Mike Daniels, and then you signed Muhammad Wilkerson, who you hope can give you some interior rush. You already have Nick Perry. Hopefully Clay Matthews can play a little bit more on the outside. So you have two guys that can kind of go on the edge, two guys that can go in the interior. I feel like they already have a decent pass rusher. I mean, a lot of people were kind of projecting like a Davenport or somebody, but I think Alexander definitely was the more ready player, I think the better player, and also a player with a bigger need, in my opinion. So I like what they did.
Right now on the left-hand side, it's Wilkerson at left D end, and then it's Matthews at left outside linebacker. So if they're playing on the same side, maybe that helps Clay Matthews a bit more.